Ever heard the expression scratching the surface? Well, get ready to go way beyond the surface today as we take a deep dive into the life of Ivan the Terrible.
A figure shrouded in mystery and controversy, definitely.
We'll be unpacking his rise to power, exploring his tumultuous reign, and trying to unravel the mysteries surrounding his legacy. What makes this deep dive so fascinating is that Ivan's story reads like a modern-day thriller, wouldn't you say?
Oh, absolutely. Full of power struggles, family drama, and those shocking twists and turns that keep you on the edge of your seat.
And we're not just looking at the events themselves, but also exploring the various interpretations of his actions. And of course, that enduring fascination with this period of Russian history.
A period packed with intrigue and no shortage of drama.
Our journey begins with, you guess it, a dynasty in crisis. It's the year 1530, and the ruling Rurik dynasty, which had held sway for centuries, was in desperate need of a male heir.
Talk about pressure.
Think Game of Thrones level of intrigue and power plays. Vasily III, the Grand Prince of Moscow, had already taken a rather drastic step to ensure the continuation of his lineage.
Drastic? How so?
Well, his first wife, Salomonia, hadn't produced a son, so he did what any ruler of the time might do. He divorced her and sent her off to a monastery.
Not exactly an uncommon practice back then.
No, not at all. The pressure on rulers to produce an heir, especially a male heir, was immense. It was all about securing the line of succession.
And ensuring the stability of the realm, of course.
Exactly. So, Vasily III, determined to have his heir, marry Elena Glinskaya, a much younger woman.
And she succeeded where Salomonia hadn't.
That she did. Elena gave birth to a son, Ivan, or Ivan the Terrible.
Hmm.
But as we often find in history, the relief was short-lived.
Oh, tragedy struck.
Indeed. When Ivan was only 3 years old, his father, Vasily III, died, leaving him as the Grand Prince of Moscow.
A heavy mantle for one so young.
And a title, I might add, that his father had already envisioned him holding. Vasily III was so sure of his son's destiny that he'd even commissioned a miniature helmet for Ivan, a symbol of his future rule.
Imagine that, being groomed for leadership practically from birth.
A heavy weight of expectation to carry. But sadly for Ivan, things were about to take a turn for the worse. His mother, Elena, who was ruling as regent, faced a rebellion, and she died mysteriously just 5 years later.
Poisoned, perhaps.
Many believe so, yes, adding another layer of intrigue and tragedy to Ivan's already tumultuous childhood.
So at the tender age of 8, Ivan was an orphan.
Surrounded by the powerful boyar families, the elite nobility of Russia. These boyars were constantly vying for power, jostling for position at court, and young Ivan, feeling neglected and mistreated, developed a deep resentment towards them.
A resentment, I imagine, that would shape his actions and decisions later in life.
Most definitely. So here we have young Ivan, orphaned, surrounded by people he distrusts, and harboring a simmering rage.
A recipe for trouble, some might say.
Indeed. But despite this turbulent upbringing, Ivan held on to that vision his father had for him. At the age of 17, he was crowned as the first Tsar of all Russia.
A bold statement.
Oh, absolutely. A title that connected him to the legacy of Caesar and the concept of divine right. This wasn't just a change in title, it was a declaration, solidifying Moscow's power and showcasing Ivan's ambition.
And marking the beginning of a new era for Russia.
It did. But for Ivan, it also meant stepping into a role that demanded strength, ruthlessness even.
Those were dangerous times.
They were. A time when power was often maintained through fear and violence. A few years into his reign, Ivan married Anastasia Romanova, chosen from a pool of over 1,500 potential brides.
A real-life fairy tale, then.
You might think so, but this wasn't simply a political arrangement. Accounts suggest that Ivan and Anastasia genuinely loved each other.
A love match amidst the power plays.
Exactly. She's often described as having a calming influence on him. For 13 years, they ruled together, and by all accounts, they were happy. This period of relative peace and stability, however, was shattered when Anastasia died suddenly, under very mysterious circumstances.
Mysterious, meaning...
Well, Ivan, devastated by the loss of his beloved wife, suspected poisoning.
And his suspicions fell on.
The boyars, of course. This marked a turning point in Ivan's reign. The grief, the paranoia, it all took root, fueling a darker side that had perhaps always been lurking beneath the surface.
And a darker side that would soon manifest itself in truly terrifying ways.
Yes, just 5 years after Anastasia's death, Ivan established the Oprishnia.
Now this is where things take a chilling turn. Tell us more.
The Oprishnia was Ivan's personal domain, a state within a state, and it became a tool of terror, I'd say. He used it to eliminate his perceived enemies, particularly the boyars, unleashing a wave of executions and violence across Russia.
A period of immense suffering and bloodshed. The word oprichnina itself translates to widow's portion, a term usually associated with inheritance law.
A strange and unsettling name for a regime marked by such brutality. It's led some historians to speculate that the name itself was a warped expression of Ivan's grief for Anastasia.
A fascinating theory. Was this terrifying reign of terror in some twisted way a form of mourning?
It's a question that continues to intrigue historians to this day.
And amidst all this turmoil, there's another key figure in our story, Ivan's son and heir apparent, Ivan Ivanovich.
He grew up witnessing his father's ruthlessness, bearing the same name and the same weighty expectations, almost as if history was setting the stage for a tragic repeat performance.
The parallels between Ivan and his son are striking, aren't they? Both lost their mothers at a young age, both were surrounded by political intrigue, and both felt that immense pressure of carrying on the dynasty.
Exactly. And remember that miniature helmet, that symbol of future rule we talked about earlier. It was given to both Ivans. It creates this unsettling sense of a repeating pattern, a family legacy steeped in both power and tragedy.
And just like his father, Ivan Ivanovich navigated a complex world of power and family drama.
That he did. And Ivan the Terrible, still grieving Anastasia, went on to marry 6 more times. Several of these wives ended up, you guessed it, in monasteries, mirroring the fate of his own father's first wife. It's as if this cycle of violence and abandonment was being perpetuated within the family itself.
Setting the stage for a truly shocking event, the death of Ivan Ivanovich.
An event shrouded in mystery and conflicting accounts that would forever stain Ivan the Terrible's legacy and raise questions that continue to fascinate us centuries later. But we'll delve into the details of that tragedy and its aftermath in the next part of our deep dive.
So, the traditional account of Ivan Ivanovich's death, it's a story fit for a Shakespearean tragedy, really, imagine it. Ivan Ivanovich, the heir, rushes to defend his pregnant wife, Yelena, from his father's, rage. Ivan the Terrible, infamous for that volatile temper, strikes his son right in the head with his pointed staff. Fatal blow.
A scene immortalized in Ilya Repin's famous painting, Ivan the Terrible and His Son. It's become a cornerstone of the Ivan the Terrible legend, hasn't it?
Absolutely. That image of a powerful ruler consumed by grief, paranoia, a family torn apart by suspicion and violence, a single act sealing their doom. Powerful stuff. But, like so much of Ivan the Terrible's story, the evidence surrounding this event is, well, murky.
Murky? How so?
We're not just accepting a well-known narrative here, we're going deeper, picking apart those details, seeing if the truth might be more complex than the legend suggests. For instance, the traditional account, it places the incident in November.
November in Russia, I'd imagine that's pretty...
Frigid temperatures, snow, ice. Not exactly the kind of weather where you'd be lounging around in your undergarments, right?
Definitely not.
Yet the story depicts Yelena relaxing in her undergarments, which seems unlikely given the climate. This little discrepancy, small as it might seem, it raises questions.
About the reliability of the whole account.
Exactly. Could it have been embellished? Maybe to emphasize Ivan's cruelty, to create a more dramatic, captivating story.
Like a game of historical telephone, where details get distorted in each retelling.
Precisely. And there's another thing. Ivan the Terrible at this time was suffering from a degenerative spinal condition,
Making it difficult to move freely.
let alone overpower a young, healthy son.
So, physically delivering that fatal blow, as described, becomes less plausible. It makes you wonder, was the confrontation really about Yelena's attire? Or was it something much deeper?
A clash over political power, perhaps.
That's a strong possibility.
Yeah. There's evidence suggesting Ivan Ivanovich was becoming increasingly assertive, perhaps challenging his father's authority. He'd faced his own share of hardship, loss. He may have been eager to prove himself.
So picture this. Ivan Ivanovich, emboldened by his experiences, frustrated with his father's methods, dares to speak out.
It's not hard to imagine.
Criticizing Ivan the Terrible's handling of the Livonian War, that conflict that had been dragging on for years. Or maybe expressing a desire for more autonomy.
To be involved in decision-making.
Exactly. Such defiance, especially from his own son, could have easily enraged Ivan, leading to a heated argument, escalating into violence.
Of course, we also have to consider the possibility that Ivan Ivanovich's death wasn't a result of violence at all.
Illness.
There's a letter from Ivan the Terrible, written just weeks before the alleged incident, mentioning his son's illness. It's possible Ivan Ivanovich was already ailing. His death, tragic as it was ultimately due to natural causes.
But even if illness was the primary factor, it doesn't necessarily absolve Ivan the Terrible. Imagine the pressure, the desperation to secure the dynasty's future.
It's conceivable, isn't it?
That he, in a moment of panic, or maybe even cruelty, hastened his son's demise, constructed a narrative of a violent confrontation to cover his actions.
It's a chilling thought.
It is. The truth is, we may never know for sure what truly happened that day. The lack of reliable first-hand accounts, the passage of time, it's obscured the details. A puzzle historians continue to grapple with. But the very fact that we're still debating this event, centuries later, speaks volumes
Absolutely.
about the power of the story.
Right.
It reminds us, history, it's often a tapestry woven from fact and fiction. What we see as straightforward narrative can be riddled with ambiguity, hidden motivations, gaps in our understanding.
And this mystery surrounding Ivan Ivanovich's death adds another layer of tragedy to an already tumultuous tale.
Because Ivan not only lost his son, but also plunged the dynasty into a state of uncertainty, contributing to its eventual downfall.
Ivan the Terrible died just 2.5 years after his son. The throne passed to his younger son, Fyodor. Fyodor, who was considered, well, slow, perhaps even developmentally disabled, he was ill-equipped to rule.
And his reign marked the end of the Rurik dynasty after an impressive 21 generations in power.
And then came the time of troubles. Chaos, as various factions vied for power, a devastating famine wiping out nearly a third of the population.
A reminder of the fragility of stability, the devastating impact of power vacuums. That's like Ivan the Terrible's reign, with all its brutality, paranoia, cast this long shadow over Russia, contributing to the instability that followed.
Even in death, his presence loomed large, shaping narratives, interpretations of his rule, which brings us to his legacy. Centuries after his death, Ivan the Terrible remains a figure of endless fascination and debate.
Monster, visionary, grieving husband, shrewd politician. It seems like there's a historical interpretation for everything.
And his image has been, well, manipulated, reinterpreted to suit various agendas.
Leaders like Stalin, Putin, they've attempted to rehabilitate his image, emphasize his strength, decisiveness, while downplaying the brutality.
Right. And then there's Repin's painting, the iconic representation. It sparked intense emotions, even acts of vandalism. A powerful reminder that history is never truly settled. The way we interpret past events, it often says as much about our present as it does about the past.
Exactly. But the story of Ivan the Terrible and his son, it goes beyond historical analysis, political maneuvering. It resonates on a deeper level.
Power dynamics, family relationships, the complexities of human nature.
It's a story that compels us to consider the nature of good and evil, the corrupting influence of absolute power, the lasting consequences of choices. And what's even more fascinating, this story, despite its 16th century setting, continues to echo in modern times. A tale from so long ago still feels relevant.
Still speaks to us today.
One striking example is the appearance of Ivan the Terrible in a rather unexpected place, a Ukrainian television show called Servant of the People.
Starring Volodymyr Zelensky, who, as you know, later became the president of Ukraine.
It's amazing how they brought in Ivan the Terrible into a modern TV show. So, what exactly happened in this scene? Give us the details.
Well, in the season 1 finale, Zelensky, playing the Ukrainian president, he comes face to face with Ivan the Terrible himself, decked out in full 16th century attire like he just walked out of a history book.
So, a time-traveling czar. I guess anything goes in television, right? But tell me, what do they actually talk about?
It's actually quite a fascinating conversation, like a historical clash coming to life. They get into this heated argument, mirroring in a way those real-life tensions between Russia and Ukraine.
What were they arguing about? Was it about politics?
It was Ivan staying true to his persona. He insists that Russia is destined to, and I'm quoting here, liberate Ukraine, echoing the rhetoric we hear in real-world politics, sadly.
Wow. And Zelensky's character.
Oh, he stands firm. He's representing a modern, independent Ukraine and asserts their right to self-determination, their desire for closer ties with Europe.
Art imitating life, right? Or maybe art predicting life, considering this was filmed years before the current conflict. It's eerie, isn't it?
It is. And it gets even more intense. The argument escalates. And Ivan, in a fit of rage, shoves Zelensky's character. He falls and ends up being cradled in Ivan's arms. It's a direct visual reference to Repin's painting.
That's chilling, especially given what's happening now.
And don't forget, Repin himself, the painter of that iconic artwork, he was Ukrainian, adds a whole other layer to it all, highlighting those intricate ties between history, art, and political realities.
It's amazing how this story from centuries ago still resonates so strongly today. A reminder that the past isn't really past at all. It lives on in our art, our politics, in the very questions we ask about ourselves and the world.
It makes you think, doesn't it? The story of Ivan the Terrible, particularly, it forces us to confront some uncomfortable truths about power, ambition, that potential for violence that seems to be a part of us as humans.
So, after going on this deep dive with us, looking at the evidence, the conflicting accounts, the myths, the legends, where do you stand? Was Ivan the Terrible a monster? A grieving husband driven to madness? A shrewd politician? Or a mix of all these things?
I think it's that complexity that makes him so fascinating. We're still trying to figure him out, debating his motives and the impact of his actions all these centuries later.
And the death of his son.
Whether it was by his father's hand or something else entirely, it remains a mystery. A reminder that even with all our modern tools, some historical puzzles may never be fully solved.
And maybe that's part of the allure. The most intriguing stories often leave us with more questions than answers, prompting us to dig deeper, examine those assumptions, and really engage in thoughtful discussions about the past and how it connects to our present.
The story of Ivan the Terrible and his son, it's a testament to the power of history, wouldn't you say? Captivating us, challenging us, and ultimately reminding us that the past, whether good or bad, continues to shape the world we live in today.
That's a great point to end on. Thank you for taking this deep dive with us. And to our listeners, keep exploring, keep questioning, and until next time, may your deep dives be as insightful and engaging as this one.